Hi everyone, it's now 5 to 6, so I'm pleased to introduce Colin, who is a fellow member of the UK Tug community. So Colin recently presented at the Northwest Tug in Manchester, and a fellow data dad in the last few months. So congratulations, Colin. I hope the little one will remain well behaved during your presentation so you don't get any random screams in the background.
Who knows, Simon? Who knows?
But if it's all right, I will hand over to you.
Okay, thanks very much. Hello to everyone, and I'm going to be talking today about the role of critical reflection to form learning in data visualization. So just a little bit about my background, really. I spent many years working in the public sector, in local government, and I set up my own consultancy, Wojtowycz, about 18 months ago. And a lot of the work I was doing has been in social research and customer insight, and then moving more into data visualization in the last 18 months. Historically, I'd used a lot of kind of legacy systems and then started using Tableau in the last 2 years. So this has been a real steep learning curve for myself. So I want to share with you a methodology that's really helped me on that learning curve, and that's critical reflection. And critical reflection really is about blending the knowledge that we get from theory with the knowledge that we get from practice. And combining both together, it leads to new knowledge, behaviours and insights. And how can critical reflection help us? Well, it can help us in straightforward ways. So for example, Alina started off the day today looking at layout containers. That's a very practical thing. And then Neil and Mark and other people have been getting more into sort of theory around colour or design, and that can help us challenge ourselves more deeply in terms of how we engage with our audience. But it's also about stepping back and saying, with my data visualization, why have I been effective? Why have I been less effective? I think we've all had those data viz that have kind of not quite worked the way that we want, and it's about how can we build and improve upon that. And I want to introduce, underpinning that, there are several reflective learning styles. And each one of those styles, I think we all have a little bit of those styles within us, although we tend to lean maybe more to one style over another, but we will dip into each of these styles as we take on a data visualization. So, for example, there are activists, and these people tend to learn best when they're exposed to a new experience, so a new data set, and we want to go out and visit. Reflectors, these tend to be people who learn best when they step back, reflect on their visualization. Has it gone well? Has it gone less well? Theorists, these tend to be people who learn well from looking into theory. So we've learned a lot today about colour theory, for example. And pragmatists are people that gain more of a clear practical value from data visualization and testing out ideas. And I'm quite a theorist. That's how I learn best. And here's an example of some of the textbooks that are on my bookshelf. And I think you can all sort of recognise those. We've got the Big Book of Dashboards by Andy Cotgreave, Jeffrey Schaefer and Steve Wexler. We've got Good Charts by Scott Berinato, Data Visualization by Andy Kirk, and of course, Storytelling with Data by Cole Naspa-Manaflik. Now, these theories are very good in terms of learning about processes, concepts, techniques. But the thing to remember is that with theories, it's quite contextualized. It depends on what the data visualization question is that we're trying to answer. So for example, classic question, what's the best chart to use in a certain situation? Is it a bar chart? Is it a line chart? It may even be a pie chart, but quite often it's not. The thing with critical reflection, it's important to challenge the established theory, particularly within the context that you're doing your data visualization. Does this theory apply to me? Okay, another way to learn is through active practice. And here's a project that probably doesn't need much introduction, and it's Makeover Monday. So for those of you that are not familiar with Makeover Monday, it's run by Andy Kriebel and Eva Murray, Tableau Zen Masters. And each week they take a data visualization that's been published in the media. They publish the raw data that goes with it, and they invite the data viz community to make over that data set and to improve upon it. And then we discuss what we've made over on data.world. And it's a really good project in terms of, because it touches on quite a lot of those critical learning styles. It's quite active because there's a new data set to get to grips with each week. It's also quite pragmatic because it's quite practical. You get to play with Tableau and play with the data and do your own take on it. But it's also quite theoretical and quite reflective. So each week, Andy and Eva will publish a recap blog, and they'll look at data viz theory. And they'll also list 1 or 2 lessons that can be learned from that. And they'll also look at best practice in terms of the makeovers that the community has published. You can also submit your viz for a viz review where they'll look at it individually and give you some feedback. It's a really great project to get involved with if you've never kind of used Tableau before. Okay, 2 other key elements of critical reflection are assumption analysis and contextual awareness. And assumption analysis in terms of what assumptions do you or others have about your data visualization and what impact does that have on your work. Contextual awareness is more about the social, cultural and political factors that impact upon your data visualization work. So in terms of assumption analysis, here's a viz that I did last year for Makeover Monday, and it was looking at solar eclipses. And on the y-axis, we've got latitude, and on the x-axis, we've got a timeline of 5,000 years. Each dot represents a solar eclipse. So the blue dots are total eclipses. This is when the sun is totally blocked out by the moon. And the orange dots are partial eclipses. And this is where the sun is partially blocked out by the moon. But the thing that I was trying to communicate is that the orange eclipses are partial only. And this was quite a complex concept to get across in a viz. And I couldn't assume, my audience was quite a general audience. I couldn't assume they would have that technical knowledge. So it was quite important to pad the viz with some annotations to try and explain what the different concepts were, not assuming that they would know. Contextual awareness. So this is a viz looking at the performance of the British economy over time from 2014 to 2017. And the y-axis is looking at percentage change in GDP growth from the previous quarter. So the blue line is the performance of the British economy compared to the G7 economies, which are shown in grey. And you'll see there's a cyclical nature. So there's little kind of ups and downs in the British economy. But the thing to note is that at the start of the chart, the British economy was 3rd in the G7 in terms of GDP growth. But by the end of the viz, Britain has dipped down to bottom. And the question that I'm trying to ask it, or set really for the audience is this just a cyclical kind of up and down for the British economy? Or is this the start of a longer term economic decline as we have voted to leave the EU after Brexit? And I tried to communicate that really by putting in a reference line to give it some context of this is where the Brexit vote was. But the key thing to understand really is who is my audience? What knowledge do they have of this? What is it I'm trying to communicate? So the impact of Brexit on the economy, and how best to do that through the choice of colours, reference lines, etc. And I think that the point really is it's that when you put your viz out there, you're putting it into a wider social, cultural context, and people's views on the question I'm posing, the viz, will depend very much on whether they voted Remain in the EU or whether they voted to leave the EU. And I also want you to think when you critique other people's vizzes, what context have they come from? What point are they trying to get across? So that's quite important. Okay, I'm just going to touch on a couple of types of critical reflection. So there's reflection on action, and this is where we look back and we critically analyse the situation and we want to improve next time we do something. And there's reflection in action, and this is reflecting upon a situation whilst we're in the middle on it and changing direction. So reflection on action, this is a technique called visual critique. You'll see it a lot in Andy and Eva's Makeover Monday recap blogs. It's also Scott Berenato's Good Chart Books touches on it. And it's essentially, it's looking at a viz that you want to make over or critique. What do you see? What is the viz trying to tell you? What do you like about it? What do you dislike or could you improve? Redesigning it and then critiquing yourself as well. So here, for example, is Makeover Monday from week 44 last year. And it's looking at the countries with the most public holidays. It's a filled map. And I can see straight away that India, for example, stands out as having the most or a high number of public holidays. So what do I like about it? I really like the colour palette. I find it quite engaging, and I find the field map quite familiar because I can recognise the countries. But what would I change about it? Well, the thing with field maps is that they can lead to spatial distortion. So you'll see that big countries, for example, Russia, Greenland, really stand out. Smaller countries fade into the background. I think the colour legend's too big, that's too prominent. And also it's not really telling me how much more a country like India has public holidays than other countries. So here was my first attempt at making over. And if I was answering the same question, I probably would have done a bar chart, but I wanted to answer a different question and I was keen to use a map. So I did a dot map. Each dot represents the centre of the country. And I was looking at which countries had celebrated Independence Days, shown in orange, compared to those that hadn't, shown in blue. And you can see there's a clear kind of pattern of ex-colonial countries in Africa and America, Eastern Europe, that celebrate public holidays. So I did my usual thing, like, you know, I published it to Twitter, Tableau Public, etc., etc. And I got a tweet from somebody called Tom Pilgrim in the Tableau community, who I'd never met before, who's currently studying at the data school with the information lab. And he said, oh, I like your map, but it shows this pattern of independence, but wouldn't it be better with the field map? Because the dots are a little bit hard, you know, they're kind of clustering on top of each other. And I took his feedback on board. I tried to take it constructively and said, yes, I agree. Okay, I will try doing a field map, and I will try a different question. I'll switch from a how many question to a which question. I'll try and simplify the color palette. And I think I agree, you know, it's a better way of showing the pattern that I'm trying to show. But the great thing is that Tom then took that idea and he iterated on it. So he did a tiled map, and he looked at where in the world do countries celebrate independence, and each square represents a country. And what you'll find is that those squares kind of get rid of that spatial distortion that maybe the field map still has. But one thing that struck me with tiled maps is they take a little bit of training. You have to familiarize yourself. They're not maybe quite as instantly engaging. So they may be aimed at a different audience, maybe more of a data viz audience, a technical audience. And then we go into reflecting on action. And this was through writing a blog. And every time I do a makeover, I try to write a blog and load it up to my website, where I will reflect back on theory and I'll reflect back on the practice. And I think the conclusion I came to really was exactly that the tile map, it looks great, but you maybe need to learn how to use it a bit more. The field map is maybe more for a general audience. And at the dot map, I don't know really. I think it probably equally has spatial distortion because large countries, the dots are more spread out, and I'm not sure really, you know, where it's the best choice. So I think it's the combination of that theory and practice and going through, getting that feedback from community members, taking it on board, that helped learn, you know, that new knowledge, that new learning. So just to finish off really, we've looked very quickly at critical reflection, what it is and how it can help us to become more effective in our day-to-day practice. We've touched on some different learning styles, and the thing to remember there is that, you know, if you're quite theoretical, then it may be that reading some books suits you, whereas if you're more practical, then taking part in a project like Makeover Monday may be, you know, a better way to learn. But it's that combination of theory with practice that leads to new knowledge. Assumption analysis, don't assume that your audience knows what you're visiting about. Try and inform them, and tailoring your visit to different audiences is very important. We looked at contextual awareness, so this is about the context that we're putting our work into, but also the context of other people's work when we critique it. Reflection in action, so this is gaining and using feedback, but then after the event, reflecting on action as well to see how we can improve. So I just want to say thank you for listening. There's more videos and blogs on my website, and if you want to contact me, please do. And a little bit of homework for the weekend. So Colin of Storytelling with Data, her second podcast that she did is all about the art of feedback, and she touches on some of the same themes of audience, context, and feedback. And it's a good blog, so there's a little bit of homework for you. But just want to say thanks for listening. Have a nice weekend, and I think we may have a couple of minutes left if there's any questions, Simon.